Welcome back to the illumilands. My name is Daniel Hurd, and I'm incredibly appreciative you've decided to give this episode a listen. In the last episode, we went over Cameron's inductive case for thinking limited things require causes. And we saw that it really doesn't leave us with much certainty. It's still wildly up in the air why the limited things we've seen have also been caused. So we can't say they're caused because they are limited. In this episode, I'll be examining Cameron's reasons to think the first cause is specifically God. And before I begin, I want to remind you that these episodes are free to watch, which is awesome. But you know what isn't free? Making them. Also, living. So if you like this content and what I do, consider visiting my Patreon and becoming a sponsor. You can get really cool perks like early access, a personal Kalam debate map, and access to a website containing more papers I've written on philosophy and religion. Your monetary support is crucial to the survival of this channel, and it means the world to me. Thanks again, and on to the episode. To begin, let me give a quick 1-minute response to a very common way of thinking that relates to Cam's Kalam. The idea that God, or something completely unlimited, exists is sometimes said to be false because logic is the ultimate limit on everything. There can be nothing illogical, and thus the first cause is limited by the rules of logic. Needless to say, this argument is incredibly weak for a number of reasons, most prominently that most people, myself included, are inclined to think that logic is not a limit. I'm not constrained by logic any more than I'm constrained by being identical to myself. I'm not incapable of drawing a square circle because of a constraint which could theoretically be lifted. Rather, I'm incapable of drawing a square circle because there's no such thing to be drawn. This is just a description of the way things must be. So I don't think this objection is a good one. Furthermore, in this discussion specifically, we're assuming Cameron has successfully shown both that there is a first cause and that limited things require a cause. And these claims imply the first cause is not limited. So the objection is irrelevant in this specific context. With that said, we can move on to the bulk of the episode. We're assuming Cameron's argument so far is sound. There is a first cause, and this first cause is unlimited in some way. Can this rightly be labeled God? Cameron thinks so. His ultimate conclusion is that
an unlimited nature points to a perfect nature, a nature that is supreme, a nature that cannot be improved upon. So in other words, an unlimited nature points to God.
Cameron's connecting the argument to God is, I believe, his weakest argument. His only defense of this claim is to pick out properties relevant to God, like
shape, size, power, goodness, or in value,
and say that an unlimited being would, by definition, be unlimited in these respects. But right off the bat, we can ask if or why an unlimited being would be required to exemplify these particular properties. Why shape? Why power? Goodness? Why any of them in particular? As we'll see throughout this entire episode, Questions like these arise because it's left ambiguous what exactly a limit is, or a limited being, or an unlimited being, or an unlimited property. All this ambiguity makes the connection to God virtually impossible to establish. So with that in mind, let's see just how Cameron gets us from something unlimited to something completely unlimited to God himself. First and foremost, Cameron says,
the first cause is basically by definition uncaused. Otherwise, it wouldn't be the first cause. If the first cause wasn't the starting point, if it had prior causes, then trivially, it wouldn't be the first cause. But then it follows from this simple argument that the first cause has no limits.
This follows from his argument, but he goes on to say,
we've already exposed a very good reason to think that the first cause is unlimited.
At face value, he seems to be equating not having limits with being unlimited. But these phrases don't mean the same thing, so we should be careful in equating them. Certainly, if there is a being that has no limits, then it must be unlimited in some way. But strictly speaking, the phrase not having limits doesn't imply the reality of any property. It's merely the denial that a thing has a limited property. On the other hand, being unlimited actively implies the existence of some unlimited property, even if it doesn't specify which property. I bring this up because critics of typical Kalam arguments sometimes note that the supposed properties proven by the arguments aren't even real properties. They're just completely negative statements. The cause is not spatial, not temporal, not material, etc. They don't characterize the cause in any positive or substantive way. Similarly, I could imagine an opponent of Cam's Kalam arguing that, technically, the cause of the universe could be something without any properties. After all, in such a case, there would be nothing that could possibly be limited in the first place, and this is consistent with thinking the first cause is not limited. Thus, we cannot say it's an unlimited being rather than something that just doesn't have any properties whatsoever. The proponent of Cam's Kalam can give a very swift and easy response. We've already established the existence of a first cause, and it's simply impossible for a thing with no properties to be a cause. At the very least, the first cause needs whatever property allows it to be a cause. That property is either limited or unlimited. If it's limited, then according to the causal principle, it requires a cause. But a first cause is, by definition, uncaused, as Cameron rightly notes. Thus, the first cause has at least one positive property, the property in virtue of which it can be a cause. And this property is unlimited. This doesn't immediately imply the first cause is omnipotent, because the unlimited property is not causal efficacy per se, but rather some type or types of causal efficacy. But this still gets us a being radically more powerful than any other causation type argument I've ever heard. A being unlimited in the powers required to produce a universe. And it reaches this strong conclusion specifically because of Cameron's unique causal principle. It's only because we can say that limited things have causes that we can also say something that is uncaused must be unlimited. Many, including Aquinas, would be content to stop the argument here. And this all men call God. But I think we're at a point in history where this is not what all men call God. That is, an atheist can consistently be an atheist and also think there's something that caused the universe and is in some way unlimited. I'm not saying they would have any proof for this, but it would at least be consistent with atheism. Well, it would be consistent unless Cameron could show that a being which has no limits and is in some way unlimited just is basically the same thing as God, a completely perfect being. And indeed, he's going to try and show this. And this is precisely where he makes a massive mistake.
We've already exposed a very good reason to think that the first cause is unlimited. Now, as a truly, thoroughly unlimited thing...
Wait, stop. Did you catch it? If not, I don't blame you. It took me, no joke, more than 10 times going through Cameron's video for me to finally spot this or really comprehend it. But it's so glaring to me now. Here it is. A being whose properties are all unlimited is not the same as a being who has every unlimited property. Assuming Cameron's argument up to this point is sound, he's proven there is a being who caused the universe and has only unlimited properties, one of which is some kind of causal efficacy. The being is
a truly, thoroughly unlimited thing
in that its properties are all unlimited, not that it has every unlimited property. But then, how can we determine which unlimited properties it has? Unfortunately, because Cameron doesn't seem to make this distinction, he seems to just assume the unlimited being would be unlimited in every conceivable way. And because of this, he gives no argument why an unlimited cause of the universe would be unlimited in a way allowing us to identify it with God. Why not think that the first cause is unlimited in the sense required to make the world, and no more? Why give it any more properties? Cameron is silent on the matter. Rather than leaving this glaring problem on the table, the proponent of Cam's Kalam could either try and establish each of the cause's properties on a case-by-case basis, or they could try and establish this in one fell swoop. The first option is the traditional option. Typically, proponents of the Kalam justify that the cause of the universe must be spaceless because it created space, timeless because it created time, immaterial because it created material, etc. By deducing what properties the cause must and must not have, we narrow down more precisely what this cause could possibly be. I think all the standard reasoning of traditional Kalams can be used here. We can describe the cause in several negative terms: spaceless, timeless, immaterial. We know it at least has an unlimited property in virtue of which it created everything, and this is probably the closest I've ever seen a Kalam-type argument come to establishing the existence of God specifically. That's all well and good, but just like virtually every other Kalam argument, we're still left with an absence of very important properties that are central to God. We still don't know whether the cause is good, bad, or even morally relevant, whether it has any level of intelligence or personhood, or whether it cares about anything, or even can care about anything. We even have, strictly speaking, no reason for thinking this being still exists. What if it produced the universe and then vanished? All these considerations show the limits, no pun intended, of the typical way to derive each property of the cause. But the proponent of Kam's Kalam could attempt to argue in one fell swoop that something which possesses an unlimited property and is also not limited in any way must necessarily be unlimited in every way. How might they go about arguing that? Well, they could argue in the following way. It's not unreasonable to think that lacking a property is itself a limit. A rock has limited size and weight. A rock is also not the type of thing capable of subjective experience. Thus, we might reasonably say it's limited to the maximum possible degree in its capacity to experience. It's so limited, it can't even do it at all. It can't even begin to do it. If lacking a property is truly an example of a limit, then the first cause, having no limits, would exemplify all properties to an unlimited degree. And it's very tempting to identify such an unlimited being with God. One major problem with this one fell swoop argument is that, plausible as it may be to think lacking a property is a limit, it seems just as plausible that lacking a property is not truly an example of a limit. That lacking a property does not entail having a limit. A non-existent property is plausibly just nothing, and it makes no sense to say of something non-existent that it is limited. There's nothing to be limited. You need a real exemplified property to be limited, and a lack of a property cannot be exemplified in any coherent way. This by itself shows that the matter is still completely up in the air, whether being unlimited and having no limits implies being unlimited in every possible way. Another problem with such an argument is that even if complete unlimitedness implies a being with every unlimited property, and even if it's tempting to call this being God, it isn't actually clear that this being is God, let alone that such an utterly unlimited being is possible in the first place. Remember, Kam's Kalam is strictly talking about being unlimited, which is not the same as being maximally great, a term those familiar with the ontological argument will recognize. If there are unlimited properties that would make a being imperfect, then a completely unlimited being cannot be God. This is especially relevant to the morality of a completely unlimited thing. Cameron is very quick to note that this being would be unlimited in goodness, but he doesn't say anything about it being unlimited in badness. Now, I assume this is due to Cameron adopting a widely accepted view among Christians that badness is not really a thing in itself, but rather a lack of a thing, a privation of goodness, just as cold can be felt, even though it's only a lack of heat. I don't know for sure that Cameron holds to this view, and if he doesn't, I don't want to give the impression that he does, but this is an incredibly popular view anyway, so it's good to respond to the suggestion, and I wouldn't be surprised if this was Cameron's actual view. I don't think there's any good reason to believe the evil is a lack of goodness view is flawed. And if it's true, I am inclined to think that a being unlimited in every possible respect is equivalent to being God. Having said this, I also don't think there's any good reason to think the view is correct. Why not think good is the absence of bad? We have no more reason to think one way rather than the other. If you accept that badness is as much of an existing thing as goodness, then you should view a completely unlimited being as completely unlimited in badness in every possible way. In such a case, a completely unlimited being would certainly not be a perfect God. In fact, it would be some kind of devil. At the end of the day, virtually everything about Cameron's connection between his argument and the existence of God specifically is controversial. Now, that's different than saying everything about the connection has been shown false. It hasn't. But it's left unanswered what exactly a limit is, and thus we can't clearly say that lacking a property is itself a limitation. Because of this, we can't say that a being unlimited in some way, and also having no limits, is the same as being unlimited in every possible way. Similarly, it's left unanswered whether good and bad are both substantive or whether one is merely the absence of the other. So it's unclear if complete unlimitedness implies God's existence or the existence of an unlimitedly bad being. All this makes the link between Cam's Kalam and God very uncertain. Cam's Kalam, though logically valid and not obviously false, is on far too shaky grounds to be persuasive to an atheist or even to a neutral observer. And that concludes Cameron's presentation of his personal Kalam argument. I'm super glad I was able to put together this detailed analysis of Cam's Kalam, and I really hope you guys enjoy it. Seriously, because I had an absolute blast putting these 3 episodes together. Granted, it was a lot of mental work, but it was completely worth it. If you want this series of responses to the debate to go on, let me know in the comments. In fact, let me know if there's a specific video you'd like to see me respond to. It takes a crazy amount of my mental energy to make these episodes, so I really gotta limit myself to what people actually want. Thanks again for watching, liking, subscribing, all of that. And a special thank you to those who decide to support the channel by becoming patrons. That is vital for this channel to continue. I hope to see all of you in the next video.